Now, before we wrap up this episode, I did want to ask you as well, Mina, about Bad Sport on Netflix. You appeared as part of this documentary. Bad Sport is a Netflix series, but there was an episode about the Calciopoli scandal in Turin, which you were part of. I watched it last night, and it's really fascinating. Our old friend Gab Marcotti is also on this one. I'm really curious to know, because it really focuses this documentary on the story of Luciano Moggi and his involvement. I think it does a really great job, especially if you are someone who knows loosely about Calciopoli. If you are familiar with the concept but you don't understand the detail of it, I think this documentary might really help you to understand it, because the thing that I've always struggled with Calciopoli is, I think an English audience wants to refer to it because they heard about this big scandal in Italian football and Juventus got relegated and clubs were punished. They want to refer to it as a match-fixing scandal, which actually isn't. There's never any proof in Calciopoli of fixed matches. What there is lots of evidence of extremely not appropriate relationships between Luciano Moggi and the people who are choosing the referees for matches. So there's no evidence of a referee being made to make decisions, of being made to throw a game. But there is evidence that he's strongly influences which referees get assigned to which games, and not just Juventus games either. Even there's a point in the documentary they talk about a Fiorentina game where it was convenient for Juventus for a bunch of Fiorentina players to get booked, and so a referee who's very card happy gets assigned to it. I was curious to know how you felt as someone who is an acknowledged and proud Juventina, revisiting this story, and how you feel about that whole period under Moggi and how you relate to it now.
Oh, it's an interesting question that I don't actually know how to respond. It's annoying when you have such a complicated issue and you have an hour and you're trying to, you're trying to get, because obviously the most important part of this documentary was bringing in Moggi. And at the time, we didn't know if that was something that was possible at the time. Obviously, producers made it work. He wanted to be a part of it.
Just to clarify that, what Mina's saying, Moggi's interviewed on the show, which is fascinating because I hadn't heard him interview this directly about it before. Yeah, really. Yeah. No. Sorry, carry on.
And I think that also, I think that for a lot of us who, a lot of people perhaps who don't speak Italian and who weren't able to follow everything that was going on at the time. Obviously, I'm a Juventus fan, so for me, it was like my life. But for others, hearing him crying on the phone, I think was a little bit shocking for me, because Moggi did have that aura, and I think that was really perfectly encapsulated in the documentary, that he was this man that sort of just seemed to own everything. He was sporting director of Juventus, but it seemed like his power was omnipotent, like he was everywhere. I mean, he would have police escorts to certain things. Everyone wanted a piece of him. He had managed to rise from sort of quite humble background to being one of the most powerful men in the industry, if not the most powerful. And it's interesting because they sort of juxtaposition his positioning like against like Berlusconi is this big match between Milan and Juve. And despite one of them being like one of the most famous politicians, former prime minister of Italy, Moggi still looked like he had the more power. And then you hear this phone call in which he's crying, and you're thinking, wow, like this is how big Calciopoli was. This was the end of his career. This was the end of Juve as being this, overpowering team. And there was a lot that was sort of just mentioned at the end, like, oh, Milan were also deducted points and this, but it doesn't go into what happened. And also, for example, the legal cases in which Moggi and his team actually released a bunch of phone calls that showed how much of the other people who are important in their clubs, whether sporting directors or otherwise, were also contacting or had relationships with referees. So that, again, wasn't looked at. And I am going to mention that because I am a Juventus fan, and I think it's important from a journalistic point of view to point out that this was something that was happening and should have never happened from anyone. But at the end of the day, people say it destroyed football. Of course it did. I mean, I think Italian football was already in many ways being destroyed. I mean, through different things that had happened as well, that there are other episodes that required, but there was also drug scandals before, and there was all types of different things. But I just wish that there were just more hours to have gone through further things but we had to pick sort of important things like Paparesta, like, what happened between Milan and Juve in that rivalry to get to win the Scudetto. But what I thought was really interesting was the documentary came out, and I was going to get like a morning croissant, and I'm in the queue to pay, and I get like a little nudge on my elbow, and I turn around and it's Antonio Giraudo. And he's like, ciao. And I was like, and I really wanted to be like, did you watch it? But I didn't know what to say, so I just went, hey, how are you? And then he was like, yeah, I'm okay. It should be noted that I don't really understand much of what he says because my Italian is not that strong. So the conversations are very limited. But he literally lives like 4 rows down from me, so I see him a lot when he's here. So, but I just, when I see that, and I just think, God, can you imagine like now bumping into Luciano Moggi? But yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that period's over and we're onto different things now in Italy.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar, Antonio Giraudo was a director of Juventus in this period, which is why that's a pretty random person to bump into when you're getting your coffee.
Triad, it was.
Yeah,
triad.
Sorry, no, finish. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, obviously, Juventus triad was Bettega, Giraudo, and Luciano Moggi. And so to see any of them in this time, especially when the documentary has just been released, But my biggest fear was that Juve were going to, because obviously I didn't want to be sort of outcasted from that. And there were things, because we did this in 2019, like that affected me because our interviews were so long. And obviously a lot of it will get edited out for the 1 hour, right? And, for a really long time, I'm on a personal level for 7 months, I was really worried about some of the things that I said, because 2 years ago or 3, I wasn't perhaps so conservative in what I said. I mean, I'm still not conservative. I'm never on the fence. Yeah. But there was a part of me that was like, maybe I said too much, or maybe I gave away my emotions too much. But I'm really glad for like Raw Productions to have been able to see through what was emotional and what was not, and give me like my journalistic integrity,
I thought it was a really well put together documentary. I didn't think you said anything that was lacking integrity, Mina. I thought you spoke really well.
I might have cried at one point, which was cut out.
I agree with you that more time would have been better. There's so much to say about that topic. It's a huge topic, and any attempt to try to pick up everything that wasn't said here at the end of a podcast that's even shorter would be ridiculous. I think I definitely would recommend the documentary to people who want to know more about the topic. And I think that one of the things that was really sort of the other really powerful sort of point I think that comes up in that documentary is that the kind of power we're talking about, there's this really muddy overlap between things that are just outright wrong, like the fact, again, that the refereeing decisions, the assignment of referees to matches was supposed to be randomized at that time, was supposed to be completely not influenceable, in fact. And yet you have a recording of Moggi on the phone saying, well, these referees for these matches would be good. And then all of those assignments happen randomly. You have that, but then you also have this other kind of power, which is soft power, which is talked about, where he basically can get his mates in the media to put his talking points on national TV and influence everything that happens by making them into these big national stories. And I think that form of soft power, no one should kid themselves that that's gone away. I think that's still very much a part of not just Italian football, frankly, but I think it's really
everywhere.
But I think it's really interesting knowing, seeing with clarity that soft power, which again, that is not an illegal kind of power, to be able to have a friend in media and say, let's be great if you talked about this. I think what's interesting, or popped into my head anyway, was Antonio Conte at Inter saying that he didn't get the protection at Inter that he was used to from Juventus. Now, of course, Conte was managing Juventus long after Moggi, but they're sort of between the playing career and everything else. There's some overlap as well. So interesting stuff. We could talk about that for ages.
But can I just also mention Ronaldo feeling? I was going to say, like, you know, just to oppose that, is Ronaldo feeling that he had more power when he was under Florentino Perez than when he came at Juventus. So when he was sent off against Valencia in the Champions League, something that had never happened to him in his career, that he didn't win the Ballon d'Or and it went to Luka Modric, he immediately felt that he was in a club that was no longer as powerful. So it's interesting to see, and now speaking because of what's happening and lots of questions being asked about why the media aren't jumping on Ole Solskjaer's back, that soft power might still exist, not because of him or other people, but because of those who would benefit from it. That still exists, sadly. And I wonder how much of it does influence things, you know?
Of course, absolutely. And yes, huge topic. We'll have to make a separate soft power podcast. But anyway, that's all I'll say about it. Everyone go and watch Bad Sport. I recommend it.